On March 19, 2026, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff walked to a Pentagon podium and said something that stopped every defense analyst in the world mid-sentence. The A-10 Warthog is now in the fight across the southern flank and is hunting and killing fast-attack watercraft in the Strait of Hormuz. Not a destroyer, not a carrier strike group, not an F-35 or a Tomahawk missile or any of the $2.5 trillion worth of naval hardware the United States had positioned in the region. A 50-year-old ground attack jet built to kill Soviet tanks on a European battlefield was solving a problem that the most expensive surface fleet in human history could not. At that moment, the Strait of Hormuz had been effectively closed for 3 weeks. Over 1,100 vessels, a quarter of them oil tankers, sat anchored in the Persian Gulf with nowhere to go. Crude oil had jumped 45% since February 28th. American gas prices had risen 25% in under a month. Iran had struck more than 20 commercial vessels. 7 sailors were dead. The U.S. Navy had 9 guided missile destroyers in the Arabian Sea. It had 2 nuclear-powered carrier strike groups in the region. It had Aegis radar systems that could track a ballistic warhead in the exosphere. It had 96-cell missile launchers, electronic warfare platforms, and the most capable surface fleet ever assembled. And Energy Secretary Chris Wright went on television and told the world the Navy was simply not ready to move tankers through the strait. This video is about why that happened, and more specifically, why the aircraft the Air Force was trying to retire 3 months earlier was the only platform in the theater that could address the threat the Navy's billion-dollar ships could not. The problem: Iran's Mosquito fleet. To understand the A-10's role at Hormuz, you first need to understand the specific threat the Navy was facing, and why that threat was designed from the ground up to defeat surface warships. Iran's conventional navy was effectively destroyed in the opening weeks of Operation Epic Fury. CENTCOM confirmed that U.S. forces had sunk 51 Iranian naval vessels by March 9th. The submarine fleet was eliminated. The frigates, corvettes, and patrol ships were largely gone. By any traditional measure of naval power, Iran ceased to function as a maritime fighting force within days of February 28th. The Strait of Hormuz remained closed. This is the paradox at the center of the conflict that public commentary kept failing to explain. You can destroy a nation's conventional navy and still not open its most important waterway. The reason is what military analysts call the mosquito fleet. The IRGC Navy does not fight conventionally. It never did. Its maritime doctrine, developed over 3 decades specifically to counter American surface superiority, is built around hundreds, possibly more than 1,000, small fiberglass speedboats, shallow draft, low radar cross-section, armed with explosive charges, Chinese-made anti-ship missiles in strapped-on canisters, and in their most lethal configuration, packed with explosives and operated as one-way suicide craft. The doctrine is the swarm. Dozens of fast boats attacking simultaneously from multiple vectors, moving at 40 to 50 knots in a 2-mile-wide corridor where a 300,000-ton oil tanker is moving at 15 knots and cannot maneuver. The logic requires no naval victory. It requires 1 boat to reach 1 hull. 1 small craft penetrating a very large crude carrier's hull with an explosive charge is enough to ignite 2 million barrels of crude and end any insurance underwriter's tolerance for Hormuz transits indefinitely. That is the threat the Navy's most expensive ships were not built to defeat. The naval limitation. Why the destroyer fails here. The Arleigh Burke-class guided missile destroyer is an extraordinary machine. Its AN/SESPY-1 radar detects air targets at over 200 nautical miles. Its 96-cell vertical launch system fires SM-2 and SM-6 interceptors against ballistic missiles. It is the most capable air defense platform afloat. Against a 5-meter fiberglass speedboat moving at 45 knots in a 2-mile coastal corridor, that entire capability structure is nearly irrelevant. The destroyer's primary gun is the 5-inch Mark 45 naval gun, 16 to 20 rounds per minute, designed for shore bombardment and surface engagements with meaningful-sized vessels. Now ask what happens when 30 small boats appear simultaneously from different compass points, some emerging from behind coastal terrain, some hugging the shoreline, some approaching head-on from the Iranian coast that is never more than 10 miles away. The gun can engage one contact at a time. Prioritization takes seconds. Each second is distance covered at 45 knots. The Phalanx close-in weapon system, the last-ditch 20mm rotary cannon, was designed to defeat incoming missiles in the final seconds before impact. It was not designed to engage a dispersed swarm across a wide sector while the ship simultaneously manages air defense, maintains station beside a tanker, and navigates a 2-mile corridor flanked by mountains that block its radar. The Navy also recognized this gap years before the war. The Littoral Combat Ship program was conceived specifically to provide a fast, shallow-draft vessel capable of operating in confined coastal environments against exactly the IRGC Mosquito fleet threat. 3 LCS ships configured for mine countermeasures were forward deployed to Bahrain. When Operation Epic Fury began, 2 of them were in Singapore. The war zone described the repositioning as largely unexplained. The gap that the LCS was meant to fill was empty when the shooting started. Strategic setup. Why the A-10 exists for this. Here is what most people do not know about the A-10 Thunderbolt II. It was not designed exclusively for land combat. It has a maritime mission role that the Air Force has been quietly developing and rehearsing for decades. The war zone documented it precisely when the Hormuz deployment was confirmed. A-10s are executing one of the lesser-known missions they've trained to do for decades, hunting down Iranian fast attack boats and mine layers in the Strait. Weeks before Operation Epic Fury began, CENTCOM released imagery of A-10s training alongside USS Santa Barbara, one of the LCS minesweepers forward deployed to the Gulf, in an exercise specifically highlighting the Iranian mine and fast boat threat and the Warthog's role in protecting naval vessels during clearing operations. The training was not improvised. It was rehearsed doctrine that the Air Force had on the shelf and ready. The reason the A-10 is well suited to this mission comes down to 4 physical characteristics that no surface warship and no fast jet simultaneously possesses. The first is loiter time. The A-10's 2 General Electric TF-34 turbofan engines are optimized for fuel efficiency at low altitude and low speed. The aircraft can remain airborne over a target area for hours, not minutes. CENTCOM's own statement on March 15th described this precisely. The A-10 can loiter for hours, standing by and ready to execute a mission whenever needed. A fast boat that tries to emerge from a coastal hide, move to attack position, and engage a tanker before U.S. air response arrives faces a different calculation when the response is already overhead and has been for 3 hours. The second is the weapons mix. The A-10 deployed to Hormuz carried a specific combination of ordnance documented in CENTCOM imagery and confirmed by the war zone. AGM-65 Maverick missiles, infrared or electro-optically guided, originally designed for armored vehicles, fully capable against larger boats and coastal launch platforms. A PKWS Advanced Precision Kill Weapon System. Laser-guided rockets. 70mm warheads with laser seeker heads, extremely effective against light vehicles, dispersed personnel, and small craft at a fraction of the cost of a Maverick. AIM-9M sidewinders for self-defense, and when configured for the role, for engaging one-way attack drones. This weapons load addresses the full range of small craft and asymmetric threats in a single sortie in a way no surface platform replicates. The third is the cannon. The GAU-8/A Avenger is a 30mm 7-barrel Gatling gun firing at 3,900 rounds per minute, 65 depleted uranium rounds on target every second. Against a fiberglass speedboat, a single gun pass is terminal. The weapon costs a fraction of what any guided munition costs. The aircraft can carry enough ammunition to engage multiple targets in a single sortie without the magazine depth limitations that define surface combatants. The cost asymmetry that had made the conflict economically unsustainable in the Red Sea, where Navy ships were shooting $1.2 million missiles at $20,000 drones, inverts when the A-10 uses cannon fire against fiberglass boats. The fourth is low-altitude visual targeting. A destroyer's sensors are optimized for the air threat domain, radar looking up and out. In a cluttered littoral environment with civilian vessels, fishing boats, and merchant traffic mixing with military threats. The sensor most capable of distinguishing a hostile fast boat from an innocent fishing vessel at close range is a human eye at low altitude. The A-10 operates at 100 feet if it needs to. Its pilot can visually identify a target, assess intent, confirm engagement authority, and fire, all in real time, in a way no surface radar system or unmanned drone currently deployed to the theater can replicate reliably. The bigger implication. In December 2025, the Air Force submitted its fiscal year 2026 budget request. The document included a line for $57 million, the funding needed to retire all 162 remaining A-10s, gone by end of fiscal year, replaced eventually by F-35s and drones. The stated rationale was straightforward. The A-10 is slow, not stealthy, and vulnerable to modern air defense systems. Against the threat environment the Air Force is planning for: a high-end peer conflict with China in contested Pacific airspace or Russia in European skies, a slow, low-altitude aircraft that cannot survive advanced SAM coverage has no role. Congress read the request and said no. The National Defense Authorization Act for fiscal year 2026, signed December 2025, prohibited the use of FY 2026 funds to retire A-10s below a minimum fleet of 103 aircraft. It also redirected $250 million from F-35 program adjustments to A-10 spare parts stockpiles, explicitly funding the aircraft the service wanted to kill. 3 months later, the aircraft Congress saved was doing something no other platform in the largest U.S. military operation since the Gulf War was doing at the southern edge of the Strait of Hormuz. Dan Grazier of the Stimson Center told Defense One after the Hormuz role was confirmed, "The longer the A-10 exists, the more impressed I am with that aircraft." He called the deployment a wake-up call for the retirement debate. His point is analytical, not sentimental. Every time the Air Force has attempted to retire the A-10, a real-world conflict arrives that needs exactly what it offers, and the aircraft delivers. The Air Force's case for retirement is not wrong on its own terms. In a contested anti-access environment against peer-level integrated air defenses, the A-10's vulnerability is genuine. The F-35 handles that threat environment. The A-10 does not. But the Strait of Hormuz in March 2026 was not that environment. Iran's air defense network had been largely destroyed by the time the A-10 arrived. What remained was a close air support problem in a semi-permissive maritime environment. And that is the problem the A-10 was designed to solve. The Navy's destroyers with their Aegis systems and their missile launchers are built for a different threat geometry: blue water combat, air defense suppression, long-range surface engagements. Place those ships inside a 2-mile coastal corridor against dozens of fast boats emerging from behind mountains, and the geometry strips away every advantage they were designed to exploit. The sea is still 800 times denser than air. A mine still detonates against the hull. A fast boat closing at 45 knots still reaches a tanker in minutes. And the billion-dollar ship's radar still cannot see behind the mountain. The A-10 flew over the mountain. It looked down. It waited. And when the boats moved, it killed them at $17 per flight hour's worth of cannon fire per second. The Air Force wants to retire that aircraft. The Navy could not have opened the Strait of Hormuz without it. The next time someone asks whether a 50-year-old jet with no stealth and no supersonic capability belongs in a 21st century military, remember March 19, 2026, and what the chairman of the Joint Chiefs had to say from that Pentagon podium. Remember that no destroyer did what the Warthog did. Remember that the gap between what the Navy was capable of and what the mission required was filled by an aircraft that cost less to operate per hour than the fuel bill for a single Aegis combat system deployment. Speed and stealth win wars at altitude. Persistence, cannon fire, and the ability to stay overhead win battles in the strait.